Okay, welcome to the video. SIG guy here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to completely disassemble and reassemble the SIG Sauer P220 full-size 10mm. In this video, I'm going to be using the SAO Legion. Let's get started. I highly recommend watching this video all the way from beginning to end. That way there's no surprises. You know exactly what to expect. There's nothing flying out at you or dropping on the floor and you didn't see it drop on the floor. You'll just know exactly what's going on before actually disassembling your firearm. Also, you'll know exactly which tools are needed to complete the process. Whenever we're working on our firearms, the first step is to make sure it's a clear and safe firearm. So we're going to lock our slide to the rear. We're going to physically and visually check, make sure there's no round in the chamber, no magazine, check our breech face, look away, do the same thing again, chamber, magazine, breech face. We are working on a clear and safe firearm. So before we get started, just kind of a brief little overview here on the P220 10mm. This thing is a massive gun, okay? And I want to illustrate that because if you're on the fence about getting one, this may not be for you. If you're the type with weak hands, you got arthritis, you got wrist issues. I mean, I got wrist issues from turning a wrench for many decades. And even my wrist actually, after messing around with this thing for a while, starts to hurt. Again, it's probably not for you if you have any of those issues. If you're an avid outdoorist, you know, and you're in the back 40 or up in Alaska or whatever, where the predators, I mean, everything out in the woods wants to eat you, this is definitely the pistol for you, okay? This one here will take care of, I mean, there's reviews and stuff out there of grizzlies, even moose, people hunting with 10 mil. So definitely this is probably one you want in your backpack if you're out there. So like I said, I just want to illustrate how heavy this thing is. If you got the P320 10mm, this thing here is actually, I mean, there's night and day difference between the two. The round is basically the only similarity they have. This thing here is actually pretty enjoyable to shoot for being a 10mm. It's not sprung very heavy, okay? The grip here itself is polymer, so it's pretty nice and light. It is top heavy, like I said in my review when this first came out. That part I don't really care for, but and we have our wiggles associated with the slide, the FCU, and the grip, how they all interact. Not knocking that. That's kind of a 320 thing, especially there's no magazine in it. It's a little bit more noticeable. But this thing here is relatively light, pretty easy to shoot. So if you're thinking about, you know, getting this because you have this, but you have other issues like with your hands, that's probably not a wise decision. And I'm not trying to ruin sales here. I'm just kind of trying to give people an idea of what they're getting into. All steel, obviously no rattles or anything. Everything's CNC. It is massive. This is literally like a hand cannon. Even, you know, at the range and shooting and handling and everything, your hands just get tired because the thing is so heavy. So with that, let's kind of compare things here really quick, and then we'll start the disassembly portion. With the 320 polymer, we'll weigh this in. Like I said, this isn't going to be a review video, just kind of a quick little point here I want to make on how heavy that thing is. So unloaded, 1 pound, 13.8 ounces. None of these have magazines. They've all been cleared. So that's our P320 X10. And then when you get into your 226 X5s that SIG USA is offering now, when I first got my German 226 X5, the first thing I noticed was like, wow, this thing is heavy compared to my 226 SAO Legion and 229s and all the other classic SIGs I got from SIG USA. These ones were way heavier. So we'll weigh that in. That's 2 pounds, 6.5 ounces. And then we'll move right to our 220 10mm. 2 pounds, 9.7 ounces. So this thing is pretty beefy, okay? Not a light gun at all. This thing means business. So That's kind of the only point I wanted to illustrate in this first segment here. So now let's move on to why everybody came to this video, the complete disassembly and reassembly of the P220. As you can see, mine has some upgrades, but yours is going to disassemble the exact same way if it hasn't been upgraded. I got the Armory Craft skeletonized hammer, Armory Craft extended mag release, their dual adjustable trigger. I got the SIG Armor's super strut in here. I think I got the Armory Craft competition sear spring in here. So just know that yours will come apart exactly the same. If you're interested in any of these upgrades, I do have them available as well on SIGguy.com, as well as upgrades for just about every single SIG pistol out there, and factory parts as well. So we're going to start off by, we'll do the upper first. We'll do a field strip here. We'll lock our slide to the rear, and then we'll release our slide. And then we're going to remove our guide rod and spring. Now, this is a captured guide rod and spring, which is, thank God, because this spring is very, very, very stiff. Okay, so we'll set that aside. We'll remove our barrel, 5-inch barrel on this beast. Okay, it's like a cannon, looking down a cannon there. So there you have it. Now, the first thing we're going to do, we're not going to remove our sights or anything. They're obviously dovetail sights. Everybody knows how to remove those and replace those. I do have sight pushers as well on SIGguy.com in the tool section if you're needing to remove or install sights. Our sight plate, basically just 2 Torx bolts on there, Loctited on there as well. I'm not going to take those out because I'm not going to put an optic on this, and I don't want that coming loose. So really the only thing to remove on this thing here, we'll do our extractor, which is a little bit different design than we're used to seeing on our classic SIGs, and we'll do our firing pin as well. We'll start out with our extractor. Now, if, like I said, you have weak hands and stuff like that, and there's no need to take your extractor out, maybe you're just doing a cleaning or whatnot, I don't recommend taking this out, okay, because it does take quite a bit of hand strength, even pretty difficult for me as well. So on our extractor here, we have the extractor itself, and then we have a pin behind it, and then we have a spring inside here. The spring is pushing out on the pin. The pin is kind of capturing our extractor and holding it into place. So what we need to do is get like a small flat tip here, like this one here. We're going to get it in between our pin and our extractor. We're going to use the screwdriver to pull back on our pin to release the extractor. And then the extractor is kind of hard to get out of there, depending on, especially if it's a newer pistol like this and it's not broken in. So then I'm going to use a 90-degree pick to kind of get in behind my extractor and kind of pivot it up and out of there, okay? So let me get set up here. I know this is probably going to be difficult to show on how to get this thing out of there. I'll do my best here. But as you can see, you can kind of just stab it like that with your screwdriver. So the screwdriver is in between that pin and the extractor itself. And then when I put the heel of my hand on the back of the pistol like this and kind of pull the screwdriver towards me as you're pushing in, I can get that pin to go slide back a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that back, and then I'm going to take my pick and put it in behind the extractor, and I'm going to kind of pivot my pick like that, and it should pop that extractor up and out of there. So on your pin too, you don't really want your screwdriver stabbed in there like all the way. I don't know if you saw that on video there. And then when you release it, my pin just shot into the dust cover here. Oh, there it goes. Just be mindful that that pin is spring loaded and it will come shooting out of there, and you don't want to lose that, okay? So here's the extractor. Okay, and it was basically in there just like this. Okay. When it's sitting in there like this in the pistol, the pin is basically over it just like that. It's got that little notch in the back. So the pin is capturing it just like that. So we got to pull our pin back so we can get this up and out of there. Now this leg here is in a little cavity, so you can't just slide this forward. It's got to kind of come, the back's got to come up and out. That's why I rotated it up and out with the pick. Okay. So there's those pieces. Don't lose those. I don't have any of these on SIGguy.com yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to stock them. 220 is not hugely popular. And then you have your spring down inside there. Right inside the hole there. Now that may or may not come out on you. Like I said, it depends on how new your stuff is. With mine, I was able to whittle down a long Q-tip. Basically, probably a toothpick will work as well. It's in there at an angle. It's not straight in there. It's kind of facing out on that angle right there. So if you kind of like thread in like a toothpick, kind of tug on it a little bit, you can actually get that to come out of there. Because what I found was the ends of the spring, they're kind of mushroomed out, probably the process used to make the spring, and it's a tighter fit on the ends in the hole. So when this gets smashed in the hole there, this here it doesn't want to let go of the bottom of the cavity. So basically, if you use a toothpick, or like I said, I whittled down one of these long Q-tips, used for cleaning, just kind of like a screw, kind of thread it in there, and then it'll bite, and then you can pull it out of there. Be very careful. Do not break your toothpick off inside your spring and then not be able to get your spring out, because then it'll be plugged up with the wood here, and it's not going to work as good as it should. Okay, so just be very careful. Maybe even just leave this guy in there if it's low round count or whatnot. And like I said, you're just doing a cleaning. Maybe you're going to replace your extractor. I mean, I'd want to replace the spring while I'm in there too. Just be very careful about how you're going to remove this. You don't want to break anything off inside that channel. Next, we'll remove our firing pin. Kind of notice how things are, okay, before you start disassembling them. And a tip that I put in my other videos usually is take your smartphone in video mode and take video at all different angles, all over whatever you're working on. Okay, that way, if you're unsure how things go back together, you can refer back to the video. Video is awesome because you can zoom in on it and you can scroll forward and backwards to get the perfect shot to see whatever it is you're trying to look at. With pictures, you only 5 or 6 pictures. Well, you really needed more of this angle and more of that angle. With a video, moving it all around, all on the front, the side, the left, the right, the top, the bottom. You got like a million pictures there, and it's saved my butt many, many times. So notice how your firing pin is. It's almost all the way recessed. That way when you're putting it back together, if it's not all the way recessed, well, guess what? You don't have it in correctly. So notice the position of your firing pin safety, the way it's, orientated in there. And then on this here, we don't need an E2 punch. This pin is just solid all the way from one side to the other. Okay, so I'm going to use a 3/32 punch, and I'm going to knock that pin all the way through. I'm going to put this onto my t-shirt here so we don't muck up our finish. And then an armorer's hammer, Delrin on one side. It's probably not brass, but something soft like brass on the other side. I'll give that one whack to get it started. That way now I know my punch isn't going to drift off to the side and you're actually hammering it into the side of your slide. And you can see we're moved there a little bit. So we'll kind of try to line this up over our hole there. And we'll just drive the pin as far as we can go with our hammer. You have to lift it up off of your armor's block a little bit. Knock it all the way through. There's our pin. So this is a roll pin. It's not a solid pin, so just make sure you use the appropriate size punch to where it's not too small and it's going inside the pin and kind of flaring it out and making a tighter fit as you're driving it more and more into there. Okay. So there's our firing pin, position pin. Positioning pin, retaining pin, whatever you want to call it. The pin that holds your firing pin in. So now my firing pin is actually being retained by my punch. As soon as I pull my punch out, that's going to want to spring out. So make sure we put our finger over it like that, and we'll pull out our punch. See it popped out a little bit. And now once we push in our, let me get a nylon punch here. Once we push in our safety, firing pin safety right here, it's going to pop out even more. So you got to push this almost all the way to the bottom. See that? And it come out pretty forcefully, so make sure you have that covered up. We're going to push that. It's just a plunger. You're pushing in on that safety. And now that allows me to slide my firing pin out. Let's keep pay attention to how our firing pin is positioned when we're pulling it out. Because as you can see, it's solid when you look down on it on this side. But when we rotate it over, it's got these notches, excuse me, on the other side. So those notches need to be faced towards the top of our pistol. So we'll set that aside over here. And then we have two pieces that are just kind of sitting there. We have the firing pin safety lock itself. And the little spring. Okay, so the spring is in a hole in the end there. Just like that. So make sure you do not lose your spring. We'll set that aside over here. And then the lock itself as well. As you can see, the firing pin is extremely easy to remove on this. So, I mean, if you just wanted to take it apart for maintenance, even after the range, it takes 2 seconds to take the firing pin out of there, clean out your channel and everything, make sure it's all nice and clean. Do your breech face. If you want to use like solvent on that and then scrub it, and some of that solvent might get through the hole there for the firing pin. Well, you want this channel to be completely bone dry when all this stuff goes back together. So do all your cleaning, then run your Q-tips in and out of this hole and make sure she's just nice and bone dry. So firing pin takes 2 seconds to replace. I'll have to research the part numbers and everything. It looks like the regular firing pin for all the other classic SIGs. But I do have firing pins and firing pin springs on the website. This lock I do not have. That's a different looking lock than we just traditionally see, as well as a spring. Usually it's a big spring, wide spring, short, wide. This is really narrow spring, more like our magazine release type springs. I do not have any of this on the website. So just check your part numbers and everything thoroughly to make sure with whatever's on the website for the 226s and classics is compatible with this or not, as I don't know at this point, being my first 220. All right, so basically you would clean all your firearm up, make sure everything's good to go, nice and squeaky clean. Light coat of oil is what SIG recommends on the external surfaces on your firearms. Like I said, the channel here, bone dry in here. Everything else lightly coated with oil or grease. I use grease because grease stays put. So once you're all cleaned up, we'll start reassembling our slide. Now we'll reassemble, and the first parts we're going to put together is our firing pin safety and the spring. Okay, so I got the spring in there. The spring goes towards the back. Okay, see how this is the back when we rotate it over? It's towards the rear of the slide. And then this groove is perpendicular to our slide, and the lower step there is towards the front. Okay, so I'm going to kind of hold it like this, rotate my slide up, put that in there, kind of rotate it around, and then we'll give it a little functions check. So let me show you what's going on here with this striker. I keep saying striker safety. It's a firing pin, obviously. So if I say striker, it's because I've been doing the 320 stuff for way too long. So if we look in the bottom or the back side of our cavity here, you can see the safety going up and down. Stop focusing on the flashlight. See it? So when I push that in as far as I can with my fingernail, you can see the hole through the front of the breech face where the firing pin goes through. So basically that's got to be depressed a little bit more in order to get our firing pin back in there. Okay, because we want the portion on this side to be all the way recessed into the slide to open up that cavity all the way for our firing pin to slide down inside there. Okay. And then when we take it apart, that's the same thing. If your spring's getting caught up on something there, it's because you're not pushing that in there far enough. A lot of times you can't get it far enough with your finger. That's why I used this nylon pick. The ends of it broke off. This is like one of my favorite tools. It's a regular pick with like the 45 and the hook on the other end. They broke off, so don't throw them away because you can use them as a punch like this and not scratch up your stuff. Anyway, so with that rotated, and make sure you're perpendicular, and then you slide it in far enough, this will go right by there, okay? So what I want to show you too before we put that in there is, remember these grooves need to be facing the top of the slide, so they need to be straight down. What I do is, because you can't see those grooves once you install that in there, and the reason why it needs to be facing like that is because the way our pin captures our firing rod, the pin actually goes through here just like this, okay? So if this is upside down and you go to drive your pin in, it's going to smash into the side of this firing pin, and now you're in a pickle because you can't push the pin out because it's blocked by the other side. You can't get a punch in through this side to knock the pin out because it's just going to hit the side of the firing pin. So now you're going to have to try to get the pin out by pulling it out, and good luck to that. So you want to always make sure that you're in far enough, okay? Because when we first put this in the hole, it's going to be kind of be like in this position here. We're going to have to push our firing pin in a little bit, just like that, so we can get our pin to go right in this hole and right out the other side of the slide. So what I like to do is, to make sure this is orientated correctly, is I'll put it where, like, I know this is towards the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll take a Sharpie, and I'll have those notches facing at, like, 9 o'clock. And I'll make a little mark over here at 3 o'clock. And then I'll kind of draw a line down the side here so I can see it when I install it. And then as long as that line is relatively straight up, I know these channels, or these notches here, are straight down, okay? So that's a little trick there. And then on our spring, this spring it's got two different ends. One's tapered, this end here, and this one here is not tapered. The tapered end goes into this little notch here on our firing pin. So when you put this in there, kind of twist it and push in, and it'll lock itself right into place there, okay? And then to remove it, just kind of grab it and twist it off and pull, okay? Just like that. So we'll get this started. We'll get this situated like we need to, perpendicular. We're going to push that in as far as we can. We're going to slide our firing pin in. We're going to pay attention to where the lines are on the back of our firing pin. I'm going to use my other punch here and push that in. And then we can let go of our safety once we're all the way in, and then slowly release our firing pin. And you'll see right there, it's captured by our safety, okay? So it's not going anywhere as long as we don't push our safety. And that is not the resting position, okay? Because remember, it was almost flush. So if we tip it over to this side, you can actually see in the hole here our firing pin and our spring. So when I push on my firing pin here, as we're looking through that hole, that's the cavity we're talking about, the notch in the firing pin that needs to be completely open when we install our pin, okay? You can see how that firing pin is covering up half that hole. Well, if you had that firing pin 180 degrees, that hole would be covered completely, okay? And then you go to jam your retaining pin in there. You smash that baby in there. It's going to collide with your firing pin, and you're going to be screwed, okay? That's going to be a difficult one to get out of there. So just make sure when we're putting this back together, our pin is far enough forward to where that cavity is opened all the way. So I'm going to show you a trick on how to reassemble this, and it's kind of foolproof so you don't get yourself into a pickle. What I use is my medium punch in my disassembly and reassembly kits. Okay, this is the 226 or 22X disassembly and reassembly kit that I'm using. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in through this side here, okay, because it's going to act as a slave pin. And as you can see, it's hitting my firing pin right now. Okay, so I'm going to use my other punch here. I'm going to push in on my firing pin, okay, and then that'll slide. Oops, let me show you that on camera. See how it's hitting? When I push my firing pin all the way in, it allows me to slide that all the way through. So right now I know my firing pin is positioned perfectly. You can see how it's almost all the way recessed. But like when we took it apart, you can see my line just a little off, but it's for the most part straight up. Okay, so we're going to leave that there. We'll pull it out just a little bit so we can get our other pin started. Okay, and that's just going to act like a slave pin. So we'll take our roll pin here. We'll get that started just like that. SIG always recommends that you replace your roll pins. If you're careful with them and you take them out and they're not destroyed and everything, I have no problems putting them back, especially if, like I said, low round count. If this thing's wore out or whatever and it's time for an overhaul, then obviously let's get some new pins and put them in there, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my armor's hammer now. I'm going to kind of hold my, let me zoom out a little bit. We're a little bit too close here. I'm going to use my finger over here to keep that from flying out when I hit my pin. And then I'll use the Delrin side here. And I can feel it pushing my alignment pin out. See that? And then you get to a point where you can remove this because my pin's almost all the way through. Okay. And we'll put this on our block here. And again, this is the Delrin end, so you're not going to screw up your finish. You can see we're almost all the way through. So I'll use the punch that I used to take this out. I'll give this a couple taps. Kind of center it. A little bit more. One more. A little bit recessed on that side. A little bit recessed on that side. And there you go. It's that easy to reinstall your firing pin. So there you have it. It's pretty easy to remove and install your firing pin. They're pretty much the same through all the SIGs, the classic lines there. So I really don't have an issue of taking that out and putting it together on a regular, routine maintenance cleaning schedule. The extractor, on the other hand, I don't recommend doing this all the time. This one here it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit of pain in the ass. So we're going to take our spring. We'll plop it right back into that hole, just like that. We'll take our plunger, we're going to call it. We'll stick that right in the hole as well. Like that. Now be very careful because this thing's loaded now. You don't want that spring to come flying up out of there, okay? If your screwdriver slips or whatnot, whatever you're using to install this, okay? So that's sitting there just like that. What I do is I kind of hold mine like this. I get my extractor ready. Remember, this goes, that wonky looking leg goes towards the back and the leg is facing inwards on the slide, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my screwdriver and I'm going to kind of do it in reverse. I'm going to put the screwdriver in between that plunger and the extractor. I'm still going to put it down here and I'm going to use my hand to pull that plunger back. And then I'm going to push my extractor in and down as hard as I can, okay? And be very careful because unless that pin is capturing our extractor and then that extractor is in the hole, this thing could come flying out of there, okay? So just be aware of that and make sure you have your hands over it until you're fully confident that it's locked into place. And when I put this all together, it looks like it's all in place, a lot of times I'll push in on the extractor and you'll hear it click, click, as it seats down into that hole, and then I know it's all the way in, okay? So we'll try this. I know with the camera, this is a difficult procedure to show, but I'll do the best I can here. So I'm going to put my extractor in there just like this. Okay. I'll get my screwdriver in behind that plunger. Now, if you got really good hand strength, you can just take this extractor in and muscle it right into place. I find that that pin doesn't always want to go in straight, so you can't, like right now, I can't push it in. It doesn't want to go in because the plunger is not going in straight. So when I use my screwdriver and kind of move it around and pull it back, then it goes in straight. So let's stop yip-yapping and just get it done. And then, like I said, make sure your screwdriver does not come flying off of that plunger when you got it pushed into the back. So see how I'm pushing in, I'm pushing in, I'm pushing in. My plunger, I felt it click up over my extractor, which is where you want it. But my extractor is not back far enough and into the hole. See? So take patience with this. Doesn't always go in on the first try, that's for sure. Or the second try. So right now I have my extractor. It's in, it's down, and it's flush, but that pin, fuck. I'm actually not even going to take that out of the video. He just got so lucky. And a lot of times in the videos, I make it look super easy, but there's some stuff that I struggle with too. And this extractor, I'm not a fan of at all. So that just came flying out of there. I saw my extractor land over here on the bench, but the pin was nowhere to be found. And I noticed when I first took it out, it was aimed directly at the dust cover here. And actually, when I picked up my slide, it fell out of there. So lucky to me, this thing is still there. And actually, my spring's coming out relatively easy now. So anyway, let's try this all over again. I mean, the easiest way it looks like doing this is just to kind of muscle it in there, but I certainly don't have the hand strength to do that. Been cutting down a lot of trees lately, and my arms are not happy with all of that work. So this was the way that I did it. I've done it several times already, and I think it's the easiest way to do it. So let's see if we're on camera again. Like I said, pull this in with my flat tip. What I was trying to show you was the extractor was in position just like that. Let me zoom in on it instead of trying to lift it up. I think I'm already all the way zoomed in. My extractor is in and it's flush. It's in the hole, but the pin itself is still behind the extractor and it's not capturing the extractor. So what you're going to need to do is take your flat tip, push it in even more so the pin can come out. Let me see where I mucked up my slide earlier trying to do this. Anyway, so the pin will come out and capture that extractor. So as illustrated, not on purpose either, how that came flying out of there, your extractor's in there flat, you think you're home free, you let it go and poof, stuff goes flying. So you got to make sure your extractor is in that hole. Okay, so it's flush here, and it's back far enough to where it's in that hole. And then the most important part is make sure that this pin is up over that little shelf, okay, capturing the extractor inside the slide. And there you go. That's how to completely remove and install your extractor and your firing pin on the 220. Now all we have to do is just put our barrel back in, basically a light coat of grease. I grease the barrel and then around the hood, and then on the slide here where the hood actually, you can see the wear mark there. Grease, I personally prefer it over oil because, like I said, it stays put, especially under higher temperatures, and it reduces the amount of wear on the stuff as well. And then we'll install our guide rod, and there you have it. That is how to disassemble and reassemble the upper on the 220. Let's move on to the lower. Our very first step when disassembling our lower is to remove our grip screws. Now, these are flat tips on here, but it's not actually a flat tip in the sense of it's flat, okay? It is concaved. So our proper tool, which is the SIG Armorer's tool, has a convex flat tip. It's kind of an oxymoron, but it's slightly rounded here. And what that does is it fits these screws perfectly. If you use a regular flat tip screwdriver, which it will work, but it's going to mark up the ends of where the tip is, because that's the only thing contacting on that flat tip blade is the edges, okay? So I do have replacement screws also, the flat tip ones, the AXG ones, and the new 226 X5 Torx. They are on the website as well. So we'll remove our other grip panels, and I've had 20 of these on order from SIG for at least a year now. And you would think a billion-dollar company, I would assume they're a billion-dollar company by now, could get me 20 of these things in a year's time, but you would be wrong. Anyway, so I am considering making these and having them on sigguy.com as well. I'm just trying to find a good handle which doesn't look stupid, which most of them do except this one. But anyway, so eventually we'll get some of those on the website. So there you go. We removed our grip screws. Now let's start disassembling our takedown lever, our locking insert, and kind of working our way towards the back. Also noticed on our grip screw holes, they are actually threaded into the frame. They're not inserts, so be very careful when we're tightening up our screws that you don't over tighten them and rip these threads out of the frame. Also, the trick that some people use with the older style legacy with the inserts is they slightly tighten the screw and then break it loose. And what that does is it ensures that the insert is tightened before you break the screw loose. And instead of when you're loosening it, it's actually loosening the insert and not the screw going into the insert. You can actually break your grips or crack them or as you're backing that out. So don't do that because you're just going to over tighten it and rip the threads out of this. So just keep that in mind, okay? So next we're going to remove our locking insert. So I just kind of push on it with my finger here as I'm rotating it. And then we'll continue to rotate it and pull that out. Next we'll grab our locking insert and I kind of put it on its side here. Sometimes you got to use like a magnet to get it out of there. Oops. Come on. And there is a little spring on the side. That's why I flip it on its side here so it doesn't fall out. There's a little spring here. Okay, don't lose that. Now, this is a good time to take your cell phone and, like I said in the beginning, take video all around, all different angles and everything, so I can see like how my sear spring is in there, my safety lever, my trigger bar, my trigger, my slide catch. I mean, everything. Just real slow video, zoomed right in as far as you can, all different angles. That way, if you're not sure how something goes back together, you can refer to the video when doing the reassembly. I find it much easier to remove the manual safety in order to get all this other stuff. So this one you can see it's actually a little bit different than what we're used to. It's got this style little detent spring here, spring steel or whatever you want to call it, versus that circle one with the through bolt there. So to remove this one here, basically we put it in the up position. And then I'm going to take my tape. I'm going to put it right on the side here just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get underneath this with my flat tip screwdriver and kind of pry this up. Pry this up, and actually what happens is this end here pops out of that cavity that's in. Okay, so I'm a big fan of the painter's tape. Those are basically like 4 or 5 layers right there. I have patches all on my shelf here. So whenever I do anything like this, I'm using the painter's tape so I don't scratch up my stuff. So now what you're going to want to do also is put your finger over it so it doesn't come flying out of there. I'm just going to hold it here as I pry up, and you see how that end where my thumb is already came out. Okay, so you have that piece right there. We'll set that aside and let me zoom back out. All right, so now that we have that off, that basically is the detent, as well as it kind of locks it in place, prevents the other side from coming out. So you can see that this side here, that pin that spring was on actually goes through a hole in the side of this one. So if we kind of rotate this sideways and get our fingernail underneath it and pull it up, kind of wiggle it out of there, you can see how there's the hole in this side here, that the pin on the other side goes through it, and then that spring, it's got a little groove in it that locks that in place. So we'll take this other side out the same way. Wiggle it around as we pull it out of there. Now yours will have tons of grease and all that inside there where these pivot on these pins. I've already taken mine all apart, cleaned it all up. I don't like the mess when I'm doing the videos, so when we reassemble this, make sure you put a lot of grease right in that hole there. But so it's a lot easier, actually. Well, not easier, but less pieces than the other style that we're kind of used to. You can see it kind of goes like that. Then that little groove right there is what the spring steel, the safety detent there, kind of locks it in place and keeps it from coming through. So there you go. That's how to remove the manual safety. Let's move on to our trigger bar spring next. Again, now that we've taken apart more stuff, now's a good time to take video all around it so we can see how everything is situated, how our strut is in our hammer, we can see our safety lever, we can see our steer spring, the way that's in there, our trigger bar spring, how everything is in there properly. That way, if we're not sure how to reassemble something, we can always refer to our video. We're going to be using, I use anyway, my toolkits that I have on my website, sigguy.com. This is the 22X disassembly and reassembly kit. Okay, it comes with 2 punches, or actually pin alignment tools, and a sear spring screwdriver. Okay, it's a screwdriver to help us remove and install our sear spring easily. And then we have, we have the large punch here, we have the medium punch here. There's different size punches depending on what kit you get. So this is the 22X kit, so it'll do all your classics. Okay, if you have a 365, we have a 365 kit. If you got a 320, we got a 320 kit. If you have a couple of each of those, or one of each of those, you can get the deluxe kit, which has one of everything from all the kits, so you only need to buy the one kit. Okay, you don't have to buy multiple different kits. So we're going to remove our trigger bar spring here first, and notice how our trigger bar spring is orientated. Okay, it's pointed up. We're going to, and notice where it hooks onto. Okay, some trigger bars have different holes and cuts in it and stuff where you can actually put your trigger bar in a different section on the trigger bar, your trigger bar spring in a different section on the trigger bar, and then your trigger is going to be all funky when you put it back together. Also, sometimes people put these on upside down, and then they put their, you can see how it's kind of out a little bit. Okay, well, the cavity in our grips is meant to go right over that. If this is the other way, sometimes when you tighten your screws down for your grip panels, it pinches on our trigger bar, and then your trigger won't reset and kind of does all kinds of wonky stuff there, and they can't figure out why it's doing it. So just make sure our trigger bar spring is put in the way it was, and it's hooked to where it was. So we're just going to kind of lift up and out right there, and then we'll rotate it out there. You can see there's 2 different ends. Okay. On our trigger pivot pin, notice how this side has serrations on it, and they're horizontal. The other side doesn't have any at all. So all this stuff matters when we're putting it back together, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to push this through and go through either way. I'm going to push mine out a little bit like that. And you can see now my slide catch lever is free as that pin goes through the hole there. Okay, so we'll pull that out. And then as we're pulling this out, pay attention to these notches on the bottom. Okay, how they're, what angle they're in there at. So I always kind of go on this side here as we're pushing it out. They're facing like the 7 o'clock position. Okay, so they're facing down this way, not like the 2 o'clock position or 1 o'clock up this way. Okay, and that matters because there's 2 notches in this pivot pin that our locking insert go into. Okay, so if this is upside down, you're not going to be able to get your locking insert in. Okay, so there's our trigger pivot pin. And now all we have to do is just kind of wiggle our trigger and trigger bar up and out of there. Some of these frames, they got little shelves and stuff that the trigger bar's under, and sometimes it's difficult to get it out of there. Do not force anything. Don't scratch up your frame and everything and gouge it trying to put it in or take it out. It's just got to be in the right position, and it'll actually fall right out of there. Okay, just like that. Okay, so there's our trigger and our trigger bar. This is the Armory Craft dual adjustable trigger. You can see we got an adjustment screw here and one there. And just pay attention when ordering triggers. There are some models like SAOs. There's 2 different types of triggers. Some have the trigger bar has the post on it. Okay, some the post is on your trigger. Okay, so you got to make sure that when you're ordering, you get the correct one. But I do have the Armory Craft triggers as well on sigguy.com if you are interested in those. Next, we'll take out our hammer strut, our mainspring, and our mainspring seat. Now, our seat is kind of in a notch here on our frame. It's like an anchor. And basically, to get it out of there, we got to pull this up and out of that anchor. Okay, if you got a light spring on here, you can basically just pull this right out by hand. But if you got a stiffer, like a 20-pound spring in there, it's a little harder to get that to pull up out of there. I'm going to show you how an easy way to do that. So what I do is I take my painter's tape, and I'll put it just like this. And then when we use our flat tip screwdriver in behind it and use that to pull it up out of there, you can see how it's going to pull it right up and out of that anchor point. Okay, but you're going to want to make sure that you capture the mainspring seat with your hand because it's going to want to go flying. Okay, so we'll just kind of pry this up and out of there just like that. Okay, we'll take off our mainspring seat, the mainspring itself. Your mainspring might be stuck on your mainspring seat. If so, you can just leave it right on there. It's fine. And then we'll pull our strut out. Notice how my strut is up in a notch in the hammer. Okay, so we put it back, and it's as far back as possible. So I'm going to pull this up and out of there just like that. Now this strut is the super strut from the SIG Armor. Okay, it's been redesigned to fix many different issues on the classics. Your gritty feeling trigger, and then where your cross bolt on SAOs with the manual safety hits the strut when you have your hammer cocked back, which eventually leads to the cross bolts breaking. Okay, so he's taken care of many different things that were wrong with the original design. So there's 3 different ones to choose from, so make sure you're ordering the correct one. This is the one for the 220, obviously. There's a 22X version, which is most all other classics, and there's a 239 version. Okay, and they all come with new seats now and a 20-pound, I think it's a 20-pound spring. Once again, it's a good idea to take video of everything. A couple things to pay attention to here. Your hammer pivot pin is flush on this side, yet it's sticking out on this side. Okay, because that's what our trigger bar kind of rides on, so we want it sticking out on this side. We don't want it in there flush like that. We want it sticking out. The other pin here, notice it's recessed on both sides. Okay, this is the channel our slide goes in, so we don't want that sticking out at all because our slide's going to collide with it. Yeah, that's about it. So the first thing we're going to do is remove or release the tension on our sear spring. Okay, so you can see our sear spring, the 2 legs. We have one leg here going under this pin, and the other one just kind of laying there lazily right in the bottom of the sear. Okay, so we're going to take our sear spring screwdriver. We just take that notch that's in it. We put it over our spring like that. We kind of push down a little bit and pry it out and out from underneath that pin. Just like that. And now this is all nice and free. What that does is it frees up our pivot pin here. so we can slide that out. Okay. So again, pay attention to how everything's in here. Take all kinds of video. This one's not too difficult. So we're going to take our, we'll go from left to right, I guess. We'll take our pin. This is the medium one. We're going to slide it in through the hole here. We're going to start sliding our pin out, but not all the way. I don't want it to slide out all the way yet. So we'll go about that far right there. Enough to where we can get our sear spring out. Okay, and this is the purple competition sear spring from the Ultimate Spring Kit, Master Spring Tuning Kit from Armory Craft. That's a little lighter sear spring, makes the trigger pull a little bit lighter, okay? Those are available as well on SIGguy.com, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but these struts are on SIGguy.com as well, okay? So now that we have that pin out of there, we'll pull it out a little bit more. And what I use to remove and install my sear is a Q-tip. So we actually take a Q-tip, just kind of mash it in the middle of it there. We can pull our pin out. Trying not to let that safety lever fall yet. There we go. And we can pull that right up and out of there just like that. Okay, so notice the orientation of that and everything. And then last but not least, we got our safety lever. Grab that with a magnet and pull that out as well. So notice the orientation of that. That little leg right here is point out. Okay, so it's in there just like that. So we'll put that aside. Put that aside. And we'll pull the pin the rest of the way out. Next, we'll remove our hammer pivot pin. This can go out either way. So just use my pin alignment tool, get that started, and pull that out. Pull this out, and let our hammer fall out. Okay. So we only have really two things left. We have our hammer stop with the reset spring, the pin, and our mag release. Okay, so your pin can go either way. I'm going to go from left to right because my mag release is pointed up. It's a lot easier to lay this flat. I'm going to use a 7/64 punch. Okay, this isn't in there very hard, so I'm just going to use my punch to hammer that pin all the way through. There's our pin. You can see it's not the same diameter all the way through. It's narrower in the center. Okay, and there are two different ends, so we'll address that when we go to reinstall it. So I'm going to slowly pull out my punch, and then it's a good idea to video so you know how the spring is in there, which way it's pointing, all that stuff, in case it falls out when you pull your punch out. You didn't have a chance to look at it yet. I'm going to pull my punch out, grab my needle nose, grab my seat. We'll take a quick look at it before it does fall apart. So we have two different legs. We have a long leg here, pointed up and out. And when we rotate it over, we got a shorter leg here, and that little groove in the bottom of the seat. Okay, so it's really only goes in one way. Pull that out just like that. That's how it goes in there. That's forward. So these get bent up all the time from people reassembling and putting their hammer in there wrong. These usually get pretty jacked up. So it's really easy to actually replace these, and I do have these on the website. So I stand corrected. The ones I have are for the 226, the 220, completely different. So you're gonna have to get that from SIG. Currently, I'm not sure if I'm gonna stock those or not. There's not really a high demand to replace those in a 220, and I'm very limited on space here. So, all right. So our mag release, you can see in the front of it here, there's a little detent. You can only see half of it. So what we need to do is push in just a little bit to relieve that pressure off of it, as we push that in, and then as we slowly release it, making sure we capture it with our finger, or the best thing to do is do this in a giant Ziploc bag, okay? That way that doesn't go flying on you. So I'm going to try to do this here. I have spares. I have plenty of spares, but this has taken off on me before. So I basically pushed it in, released my mag release just a little bit, so it was clear of the frame or the notch. You'll see here in a second when I let it go. But I wanted to put my pick down and hold this so I can get my finger over it. See that? So we have our mag release spring right here, the mag release itself, and then this little catch right here with a little itty bitty spring inside it. Okay. Now listen. Notice how it's positioned. It's going to go in just like this. This little high step here is what captures inside the frame. Okay. So let's say this is the wall of our frame. Once we get this, we're sliding it in, we're pressing down on that so it goes over it, and then we release it. It's just like that. That's what prevents the catch or the magazine release from coming out. So you got to make sure that you have it positioned exactly like I have it there, okay? If you have this turned around the other way, it will go together. If you have that facing out like that, I'm trying to get it perfect, and you push it into the mag release, and you're sliding this in your grip, and then it goes by that, and then obviously it lets go, and now it's captured like that. Well, how the heck are you supposed to get that back apart? There's nothing showing on this side of your frame. Okay, so you got to make 100% sure that high part is facing in towards your frame. So there is two other parts in here that you can take out. One of them I would not recommend, but one of them is the support plate right here. It's basically for the back side of your mag release. And I'm just trying to think if you actually put this in backwards, that's probably how you can get it out, because I've seen people where their frame was broken, where they tried getting their mag release out because they put the detent in here backwards, and the only other option you have there is to have a gunsmith or whatever weld that portion back and reshape it and all that stuff. But I'm wondering if you bang out the support plate on the other side, if you can get it out, at least enough to get the detent out of it so you can slide it back out. I'm pretty sure you actually can probably do that. Anyway, so the support plates I do have somewhere in this bag. Right there. Okay, and this one's for the 220, 226, and 229. So just know on the website, some of the parts are interchangeable with all the different models, but not everything, okay? Like I said, the reset spring here, our hammer stop, the pin, specific to the 220. This does not work in your classics. So if you wanted to switch your mag release from one side to the other, I do have a video showing how to remove this. It's not that easy, but it's doable. So with a flat tip screwdriver with some painter's tape over it, knock that out. I would recommend getting a new one first, so that way you can put the new one back in. You put it basically in this cavity here, and you knock it forward, locks it in place. Now you can put your mag release in through this side for the lefties out there. The other part is this pin here. Looks like it's just pressed in there for the sear spring. I do not recommend removing that. If yours is damaged or whatnot, I would contact SIG and see what their process is to get that replaced. There's no through hole to bang it out this way, so you got to be very careful on getting that out. It looks like it's pressed in there pretty good, so I would definitely contact customer support before proceeding with that. I'm not even sure if they have a replacement part for that where retailers can get it. Anyway, so if you wanted to remove that, I have that. Don't remove that pin. Other than that, everything has been removed or disassembled. Now's a good time to clean everything up, get everything nice and squeaky clean, and then we'll start the reassembly process. All right, so everything's all cleaned up. Let's reassemble the 220. We'll basically do it in the reverse order. So the first thing I'm going to do is install my mag release. Again, we're making extra certain that that little high part is facing in. If it's facing out, you're going to F yourself. Okay? So we're basically going to put this, our little spring here, mag release spring. Again, I do have replacements, all these parts on the website. So we're going to slide this in just like that. And then again, we're going to triple check to make sure that high part is towards our frame. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle nose, or my pick. I'm going to push down to countersink this detent while I'm pushing in. Don't push in hard right away because you don't want to scratch up the side of your frame. Okay, wait till your detent is pressed in there. And then push it in even more, and you heard it click, and then slowly release just to make sure that you are in all the way and it is captured. Okay, and then just kind of do a couple functions check to make sure that high step kind of centers itself and makes it parallel to the side of the frame there. Okay, that's not coming out at all. And then I can see my pin right there, so we are installed the correct way. Extended mag releases, it's not for everybody. I love them, especially if you can't get your hand all the way around. It does help tremendously. I have SIG Sauer factory ones and Armory Craft extended ones as well, okay, if you're interested on the website. Moving right along, let's do our hammer stop. So on our pin, let's put our pin in first. On our pin, if we take a really close look at it, you can see this end here is beveled more than this end. Okay, looks like it's sharpened a little bit here. That's so it goes in a little bit easier. So you want to put this side in here first. Okay, not that side. Even though it'll go all the way straight through, it's just a lot easier if you put the tapered end in first. And I find the tapered end going in on this side seems to work the easiest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that in, and depending on how loose of a fit you have, like I can already see my pin coming through there, I'm going to back it out till it's flush with the side there. Okay, see inside there? That way I can slide my the stop in there, okay, without hitting the pin. So now that that's all positioned where it needs to be, let's take our stop and get this orientated correctly. There's our little notch on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to put this just like that. This is the front. The longer leg goes up and towards the front. So we'll slide this right in here, just like that. And we'll verify that the little leg is right there on the bottom. So if we just pinch it like that, it ain't going anywhere. And actually you can hold it on the side and it kind of stays in there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this on the ramp right here, just like that. I'm going to slowly push that in there. And then I'm going to set it on its side here as I'm looking through the hole. Okay, and I'm going to line up the hole in that stop with the hole in my frame. I'm going to take my alignment tool. This is the medium. I'm going to put it through there. So right now my alignment pin is keeping the stop aligned with the hole. Okay, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to hammer my pin into the side of my stop. Okay, so where mine's, you can see it's actually starting to go through already. Okay, and this is going to ensure that it goes right through the middle of the spring as well. We're not going to crush our spring because it's not lined up with the hole properly. So we'll take our armorer's hammer with the Delrin end. I'll just kind of tap that in. Okay, that's as far as I can tap it in with just the hammer. I know now my pin is in there far enough to capture the spring. I can remove my alignment tool. And we'll set this right down on our block. And then I'm going to use a punch slightly bigger than my pin, so that way I'm not pushing the pin all the way through and coming out the other side. But it's going to be small enough to fit inside this cavity. Okay, so I'm going to use this punch here to put over that pin, making sure that I'm inside the hole and not against my frame. And I'm going to hit it till that pin is flush inside the hole. You got to make sure it's flush because that's where our safety goes. Okay, this pivot part on our safety is going to go in that hole. So you got to make sure that pin's in far enough to where our safety can go in all the way. Just double check both sides. That one's recessed a little bit. That one's recessed a little bit. There's my spring. It's captured in there properly. There you go. Next, we'll reinstall our hammer assembly. And before we get that far, I just want to kind of explain a couple steps ahead here when we're putting our strut in. Okay. Now your strut, you have a pin here in your hammer. Okay. Which I'm going to get to that spring here in a second. It needs to be above that pin. But when we install our strut, this is the front of the pistol that way. Okay. When we install our strut, we go through the hole in the frame right here. And we got to be far enough back to where this portion of our strut goes right around this cross bolt. Okay. Just like that. That's how you want it in the pistol. So that way when you pull the hammer back, that cross bolt is pushing down on the strut. Okay. Now it is possible when you install this to get it too far forward and it doesn't go, the cross bolt's not in that little notch. Okay. And then what happens is when your hammer goes back really easy and there's no tension on it. That's because you got your strut in there too far forward. Okay. You can't go too far back where it goes up on this side. It's impossible. The problem is always it's too far forward. So when we slide our strut in, we're pushing it back as far as we can, and we're making sure that it's up. And then what I do, and I'll get to it, I'll do it again when we go to install this, I kind of test it. I pull down on my hammer and make sure my strut is being pushed down. Okay. So I just wanted to show you that while I had this out, it's a lot easier to understand this part here rather than in the pistol. So when we take our hammer, I'm going to grab it like that, and then I'm going to go down in front of the spring, below the spring, and then come back up with this little pin. Okay, so I'm going to go past the spring and come back up, and you should be able to like hang your pistol, hanging onto your hammer. That little spring is hooked around that pin. That is the way that needs to go together. People put it in the wrong position, and then when the hammer goes to move and everything, it crushes the spring and bends it and all that stuff. Makes a mess in there with the spring. So anyway, with my finger here holding my hammer to where I can see right through that hole, I'm going to stick my alignment pin in there. Okay, it's a lot easier to get these pins in there to line everything up than use the regular pin to try to line everything up. So that's where the beauty of these things come in. It's like a slave pin. Okay, so now this pin goes in either way. It's the same on both sides. I'm just going to take that, slide it right through, and then it's going to move around. We won't position it. Remember, we want it flush on this side, sticking out on that side, but we'll worry about that once we get some tension on it. So now that we have that installed, we'll move on to our sear spring, and safety lever. Okay, so I got it all set up in this little vise. I absolutely love this vise. I got just a cheap one off of Amazon. Okay, suction cups to your bench if you wanted to. It's got this ball in here, so you can rotate this thing all different angles. It's got rubber jaws here, so it's kind of gentle on your firearms. And then I use a piece of t-shirt, just in, I don't want these this textured rubber design there in the side of my firearm. So I basically put a t-shirt in there, put this in here, kind of loosely tighten it up, and it acts like a perfect third hand for reassembling this stuff. So what we're going to do to start out is we're going to do our safety lever first, and I'm going to put my alignment pin, this is the medium one out of the kit. We're going to get that started just like that. And then our safety lever has this little leg on the bottom. Okay, so that faces down and out. And then this part here is basically flush with our slide. Okay, this is the lever that always pops up that your slide hits when you're reinstalling your slide. So this, we can't just kind of put on the pin and rotate it down because of the leg here. So we got to kind of go in from underneath. And what I do is I just take my needle nose pliers, grab it like that. Put it down in here like this. Work it up. It's got to go in between the hammer. Hammer in the frame. Just like that. Okay. And like I said, we got that little leg on the bottom here. Right there. That's why you can't just kind of put it on the pin and rotate it down, because this will hit the side of your frame. Okay. Get this back in here. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll put our sear back in. Again, the Q-tip. Don't worry about blocking the hole, because we're going to get it held, and then we're going to pull the Q-tip out, and then we'll push the pin all the way through it. So this kind of has to go down below the sear pin and then come up through the bottom. Okay, and then you're going to have to like rotate your hammer forward a little bit so it makes a big enough opening behind the pin and in between the pin and the hammer to get this up in there. Okay, so we'll go down inside here. I'm going to put our Q-tip up under that pin. We're going to start sliding it up just like that. Okay, so my sear is, the Q-tip's underneath that pin. It's starting to come up. It won't come up anymore because of my hammer needs to be forward a little bit. And as I rotate that forward, I felt it move more towards me. And I got to move my pin out of the way so I can get my sear up in there. Just like that. And I'm going to line up one of the holes. See how my pin's coming through my sear? I can just go all the way straight through. If it's hitting the Q-tip, just pull your Q-tip out, and then you can go all the way through. Once I have it like that, next I'm going to put my sear spring in. Basically pull this out enough to where I can get the spring in there. Just like that. You can use needle nose pliers or whatnot. You can just kind of set that in there. Put my pin in there. And go all the way through. So we're going to actually rotate this forward. That can go in either way too. It doesn't matter which leg is where. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, before we put our spring down underneath that post, we're going to install our pin. Because once we put our spring down in there, it's going to tighten everything up and keep things from falling apart. So we need to do the pin first. So I'm just going to use my pivot pin to push out my alignment tool. Get it going in there. I have the right pin, which I do. A lot of times you can just get that to go in by hand, but this is relatively new. Oops. This is a relatively new pistol, so it's a little stiff. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it's perfectly flush on this side in the rail, perfectly flush on this side in the rail. And then what we'll do is we'll use our sear spring screwdriver. I'm going to put it over this leg here, about halfway down the spring. I'm going to push that down underneath the post and then pull it towards me. Pull that out, and we'll just move it over. And there you go. That's how you get the sear spring back in there. And with the right tools, it's very, very easy. So now that we have all that in there, everything is held pretty firmly in place. We can tip it on its side. Nothing's going to fall out. So right now our hammer is in the back position. We really need it in the forward position so we can reinstall our strut and our mainspring and our mainspring seat. So all we're going to do is we're going to grab on our sear here. Let me give something to point with here. This leg right here. We're just going to take our finger and push it up at the same time we're pulling up on our hammer, okay? So I'll take my fingernail. See how it's spring loaded now? I'll just pull it up, move our hammer up, and then let it go, okay? So with our hammer in the pretty much in the forward position, we can now take our strut, and this is what we talked about, okay? It's going to go into this hole, and I'm riding the back edge of my strut against this edge that's closest to me in that hole as I'm looking inside there, and I'm guiding that strut up into the hammer. And you can see how like it can go here, but we really want it to go way in the back, just like that. Okay, now I'm pushing, it ain't going anymore. If I push on my hammer with my finger, it's pushing down on my strut. I know I'm in the right spot. So we'll just hold that with our finger. We'll get our mainspring, put it over there like that. We'll get our seat, put it over there like that. I'm going to position it on the ramps just like that. I'm going to hold all of this, and I'm just going to use my thumb, push it forward, up and over that notch. Just like that. And then we'll do a quick little function check. You can see my spring collapsed. I didn't mean to go back that far. I just kind of go like this. See, it's compressing the spring. That is installed properly. Next, we'll reinstall our trigger. Again, grease on your post here. Grease in the hole or the post on your trigger. So this basically rotates nice and freely. We're going to drop this down inside, just like this at an angle. Get our trigger inside our frame. Kind of keep moving that down around. Get our trigger started in the hole. Drop it into place. Kind of move this up to where it needs to go. And then on our hammer pivot pin, remember, we want to be flush on this side. So push it in so we're flush here. That gives our trigger bar something to ride on this side. Okay. I'm holding that with my finger just like that. Kind of line up my hole down here. Just like that. Okay. Next we'll take our pivot pin. Remember the serrated side goes towards the left, the flat side go towards the right. And then those notches in the bottom need to be at like the 7 o'clock position as we're looking at this side. Okay. So serrated towards there, those towards there. I'm just going to use my pin to get that started through the trigger just like that. So that's why these things are genius, all right? They really do make this so much easier to reassemble. So I'm going to rotate my pin so I can see my notches. Make sure this is all floating nice and free here. If you find some resistance pushing your pin in, it's probably because this is jammed up a little bit. So I'm going to rotate this till I can see my notches because I kind of lost track. And you can see that notch. See, it's facing up. It needs to be facing down here. It's up here. So you can see the texturing on my pin is up and down too. So it needs to be, so it's rotated about a quarter turn. So we just want to get it close. Okay, we're not done with this pin yet. I know that I'm close right there. So I'm going to push it through the other side again, because we need to get our slide catch in there, okay? So now that I know I'm where I need to be, I'm going to push that in, straight in. Try not to rotate it. So we have room on this side for our slide catch. And again, we can put this in like this and then rotate it down. Because this notch is so deep, you can't do that on this one. Okay, so basically you're going to set this into place. And then we're going to use our pin, put it right through there, just like that. Next thing that we do when we're at this step, we really want to get our locking insert in there as quick as possible so none of this stuff falls apart, okay? So our trigger bar is where it needs to be. Our pin is horizontal. And then what happens with our slide catch is it wants to kind of migrate that way towards the trigger itself. It needs to be against the side of our frame, because there needs to be a cavity in here and a cavity in here for our locking insert. This portion here, the walls to slide down in between there, okay? So make sure that your slide catch is all the way against this side. We're basically going to line up this notch here with our pin, and then make sure our spring is flush against the side there, okay? And then if it doesn't go in all the way, which mine just fell in. 9 times out of 10 it doesn't. You basically got to kind of just move things around, rotate your pin a little bit, just kind of wiggle it. Do not force this thing in there. It should drop in just like it did, okay? And then if it's not dropping in, it's 9 times out of 10 is because your pin is rotated a little bit and those notches in the pin are not perfectly lined up, or your slide catch is that way. It needs to be this way, okay? So see how easy that fell in there. You should not have to hammer this in or anything like that. Sometimes they fall right in. Other times they're a pain in the butt. But when it goes together correctly, it'll fall in just like it did. So now that we have that in there, we really want to get our takedown lever in there. Our takedown lever has a little notch in the bottom here. That little notch is made to push our little spring out of the way. So that notch needs to be facing the spring. Okay. And then as we rotate and push that in, it's going to move the spring down and it'll open up that hole so our takedown lever can go right through there. Okay. So you really want to get this all in as quickly as possible so none of this stuff falls apart. And then once that's in there, basically I'm going to get my trigger bar where it needs to be. I'll get my trigger bar spring, one end in this hole here, one end in that little notch there, and now nothing is going anywhere. You can actually do a function check. Everything's reassembled correctly and we're good to go. The only thing we have left is our manual safety. So again, grease in the little holes that this pivots on. We're going to take this and put that cross bolt right through here, line up our pivot pin with the hole in the back, slide that in just like that. Okay. Hold that with our finger, rotate it over. We're going to put this hole into this pin into that hole, and then make sure this pin here is coming up through that hole right there. Okay. Just like that. Push it in all the way. Just like that. And you see that little notch on that pin exposed now for this piece right here. All right, and all we have left is our little spring or detent or whatever you want to call it. This takes a little bit of patience, okay? It only goes in one way. You can see how it's kind of got this lower section here, which goes into the cavity right here. Okay, so my safety lever is up. I'm going to kind of lay this on here just like this. We're going to put this end in here first. See how it's in that little notch in the pin? I'm going to hold this with my finger. So that keeps that other piece from falling out this side. Okay. I'm going to take that just like that. And then carefully, I'm going to take my screwdriver here. Put it on that piece there. Oops. Give it a little tap. And when done correctly, we want to be on this end down here with our screwdriver, okay? Come on, you bugger. Just like that. I'm not sure if you can put that end in first and then kind of get that to go around the pin. And I'm going to do a function check really quick. I'm going to put my finger over it in case it comes flying out of there. Which everything's working properly. You can see it sliding along the side of that spring. So that's the easiest way I've learned to put that in there. I don't know if I wouldn't try bending that or anything because I don't really want to scratch anything up here. Okay. And there you have it. So as far as reassembly, all that we have left is our grips. So we'll install these. Make sure you go underneath your slide catch. I'll just kind of torque these down a little bit, snug them up. I'm not going to torque them to spec. I'd have no problems with these being flat tip. I would definitely wouldn't torque those Torx bit 226 X5 grip screws to spec. If you saw my last video, it got stripped out trying to remove them after I torqued them to spec. But anyway, so we'll just snug these up. Just like that. And then we'll do a quick functions check next. All right, last we're going to do a functions check and make sure that you're doing the proper one for the pistol that you're doing it on, okay? So this one's specific to SAO. This is right from the SIG Armor's manual. First step is we're going to cock our hammer to the rear, okay? We're going to press up on our manual safety. We're going to pull our trigger. Hammer should not fall. We'll flip our page. We're going to rotate our manual safety down, and then we're going to hold our hammer while we pull the trigger. Hammer should release, which it does. While we're continuing to hold our trigger to the rear, we're going to push our disconnector down. You should hear it click, and then it should stay down, which it does. Next, we're going to rotate our hammer to the rear, and it should stay back. And if it does not stay back, and you have a dual adjustable trigger in your pistol, basically back off your over travel adjustment to allow the trigger to come back a little bit more, and then the hammer should stay. If you over adjust this stuff, you're actually bypassing some of the safeties, and you don't want that to happen. That's why we're doing a functions check to make sure everything works perfectly at the end. Release the trigger. You should hear an audible click as the trigger system resets. You can actually see the disconnector pop up too, which it does. Press up on the slide catch lever and release it. Ensure that is under spring tension and returns back onto the frame, which it does. Flip the page. Press the magazine catch into the frame. Ensure that is under spring tension, springs back into place, and stays retained in the frame, which it does. Insert a magazine, unloaded, into the mag well of the frame. Ensure that the magazine catch retains the magazine, which it does. press the magazine catch, ensure the magazine drops freely out of the mag well, which it does. Okay, so there's your functions check for an SAO pistol. And there you go. That is the complete disassembly and reassembly of the P220 SAO Legion. I know this is another long video, but I just want to make sure that everything I'm doing, people understand, and it's very thorough. Okay, I don't intentionally make these things long. It is just what it is. So, also, if you're interested in the disassembly and reassembly kits, they can be found on SIGguy.com, as well as many aftermarket upgrades and factory SIG Sauer parts as well. I'm going to be doing a gun giveaway here towards the end of the year. I'm not sure about Thanksgiving, but definitely around Christmas time at the latest. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because you're not going to be eligible to win unless you're also subscribed to my YouTube channel. So there should be a button right down here. Just smash that baby. I'd really appreciate it. As always, thank you for watching, and have a great day.